With a final count of 314 to 117, the House voted last night in favor of moving forward on a budget deal that avoids a federal default. The measure worked out mainly in negotiations between President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, was supported by most of the Republican majority. There was a group of conservative members who voted no. There was also a smaller number of progressive Democrats who voted no. One of the House Republicans who did vote in favor of the debt ceiling deal is Staten Island Representative Nicole Malliotakis, who joins us now. You said yesterday you can't always get what you want. What compromises did you decide to accept on this?
Well, look, the reality is we are here to govern. We could not allow a default. And considering that Republicans are 1/3 of the federal government with the Democrats controlling the Senate and the White House, I thought this was a very good deal filled with conservative wins. For instance, look, first of all, we're going to be spending less money next year than we spent the past year. We are capping spending at 1%. We are making sure that we roll back Biden's plan to hire more IRS agents this year. And that's something we're going to have to continue to fight every year because we were concerned that they were going to target middle-class families and small businesses, and that was a problem. We also were able to get an expansion of work requirements to help lift people out of poverty, to reduce their dependency on public benefits, which will also save taxpayers money. So there were many conservative wins in here. And at the end of the day, this is the biggest savings in American history, the biggest spending cut in American history. And we did it all by still preserving Medicare, still preserving veterans benefits, making sure that we preserve Social Security and those important programs. So overall, it was a compromise. Yes, in Washington, that could be a dirty word. But at the end of the day, those of us who are mostly the centrists who push this across the finish line understand that we're there to govern, and we can't always get what we want, but we get what we need. In this case, we prevented the default and also got those important spending cuts that were necessary to change the fiscal trajectory of our nation.
You know, the lyrics are stuck in my head now after that quote.
Me too, all night.
There, particularly some of the city Democrats, but there was vote switching on both sides here at the last minute. But a lot of the city Democrats who said they recognized that they were up against the clock here, decided to switch to no votes in the 11th hour. Jerry Nadler explicitly said last night that he had changed his vote after seeing that there were plenty of other yes votes out there. What do you say about that having it both ways?
Well, look, I would say that most of the Democrats from New York City are further to the left than the others in Washington. And that just shows you that there were those conservative wins that I mentioned. But the reality is we have to, in this case, understand that we are a split government, right? Republicans have the House, the Democrats have the Senate and the presidency. And in some ways, this is a positive thing that we were actually able to work together to prevent something that was necessary, right? So we could not have defaulted. It would have been really disastrous to our economy, to the US dollar, to people's retirement savings. So I think the responsible vote was a yes vote. Of course, I would have liked to see more of what we originally passed in the House. But we are dealing with a split government here, and we have to be realistic politically. I think it was a smart vote to vote yes, because we, again, prevented a disaster, fiscal calamity, and we also are changing the trajectory of our country. But what I'll say is this, there's also checks and balances in place, right? The president can no longer just spend money on his own like he was doing. I mean, he was trying to do this $400 billion loan forgiveness and other rules that he would just simply spend money without cutting it from somewhere. And that was wrong. And they can no longer spend these massive omnibus bills. They spent $10 trillion when the Democrats had control for the last 2 years. That was what was fueling inflation. So that can no longer happen either. And perhaps that disappoints some of my friends on the left wing of the spectrum.
Yeah, the streamlining of environmental approvals on energy projects is interesting as well. Another thing that had been stuck for a lot of years. Here's a clip from Texas Congressman Chip Roy, who was among those who voted no. And I want to hear your response to this.
The fact is, at best, we have a 2-year spending freeze that's full of loopholes and gimmicks that would allow for increased funding for the federal bureaucracy in order to achieve a $4 trillion increase in the debt by January 1 of 2025. $4 trillion.
What about that thought that this is all going to be a
Yeah.
problem again in 2025?
Well, it will be a problem regardless of whether we pass this bill or a clean debt ceiling. It still would have been an issue. I mean, there's been 10 times this has been addressed over the last decade. This time is different because it's the first time we've actually reduced the deficit. We're actually reducing spending. But what I would argue is that those numbers of $4 trillion, that's just simply not true. And remember, Republicans control the House. So we have a seat at the table, and we will ensure going forward in the budget process, in the appropriations process, that we are being fiscally responsible. So look, the days of one party rule with these massive spending bills, they're over. And also, we put in place rules at the beginning, which if you're going to spend money, it's got to come from somewhere. And we want a CBO score, which is a Congressional Budget Office score for inflation on every bill going forward. We also have 3 days to read legislation, which was very critical in this process. So everyone knew what was in the bill. And this was a 99-page bill, not thousands of pages like the bills that were passed under Speaker Pelosi that were jammed with all sorts of other things that were not of interest to the legislation. So we are doing what I believe is the responsible thing. And quite frankly, it is this way because Republicans are here, right? We stopped that one-party rule. We have a more balanced government today, and that is a good thing for the American people.
What we just had on the screen, the mention of the SNAP benefit changes, that there are work requirements there. That's one of the things that a lot of the New York delegation keyed in on, saying was a reason for their opposition. What do you say to people who are on those benefits and concerned that their position might be compromised?
Look, it only applies to individuals who are under the age of 55. It raises the age limit from 49 to 55 for work requirements if you are able-bodied. So if you and you don't have children. So I think it's very reasonable that people who are under the age of 55 should be helping to produce in our economy, but also it helps them be lifted out of poverty, puts them on a path of self-sufficiency, potentially, and that would reduce their reliance on public benefits. I think that it's a very reasonable, and it exempts veterans and people with disabilities. So I thought that was a very good compromise, and it's quite frankly, it's something that Joe Biden had originally supported under Bill Clinton, who signed that law back in the 90s. This is an expansion of that, raising that age from 49 to 54.
Staten Island Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis with us live from Washington. Thank you.
Thank you.